population must therefore be controlled, but this fact must be withheld from the country's leaders. Amongst the countries specifically targeted were Ethiopia, Colombia, India, Nigeria, Mexico and Indonesia. Indonesia is an horrendous example of conflict creation for the purposes of eugenics and corporate control. While public bodies and the media remain obstinately silent, General Suharto took control of Indonesia in 1965 through a CIA-backed coup and has since been responsible for 500,000 murders in his own country. However, because his administration is subservient to Western corporations, allowing them to exploit the land and the people, for example Reebok, this appalling tragedy goes unchallenged in the media. In December 1975 Indonesia invaded the Portuguese colony of East Timor and, in the following years, proceeded to slaughter 200,000 people, a third of the Timorese population. This genocide, eugenics, has been carried out with arms from Britain, British Aerospace's Hawk jets, and U.S. approval from the West. Kissinger and Ford were in Indonesia days before the invasion, and complete silence in the mass media. The simple reason is that oil and gas reserves had been discovered off the coast of East Timor which the multinational oil companies could exploit only if controlled by a corporate-friendly culture, like Indonesia. Education, the media, choice, the environmental movement, mind manipulation, Project Monarch, fluoride, a microchip population. Part 7. WHOER. Until the last couple of hundred years a major tool in the programming of the collective mind has been the belief in dogmatic religion. Religious philosophies generally present a picture of creation with humankind, even though perhaps chosen by God, to be very much subservient and worthless. People who consider themselves free through the pursuit of their own dogmatic religion are amongst the most enslaved victims of the Illuminati's plan for total takeover of mind, body and soul. Fear, guilt and a host of other negative emotions have been instilled into humanity in the name of religion, the Christian guilt due to the doctrine of original sin and fear of the final judgment, Jewish feelings of divine punishment for failing Yahweh, Islamic aggression to convert the masses by the sword, the Hindu caste system in which untouchables have no hope of salvation in this lifetime. Western Catholicism, with its control over all education for centuries and its intolerance of alternatives, usually condemned as heresies with the proponents excommunicated, exiled or barbarically tortured and killed, successfully kept the masses in cringing subservience to their vengeful, yet supposedly loving, God. The Catholic Church, in turn, has been controlled and bled dry of wealth by an especially sinister organization which is a combination of elements of Freemasonry and the Mafia, known as P2. Religions are also answerable to the banks. When scientific developments in the 18th and 19th centuries started disputing the orthodox theological interpretation of who we are, people's belief in the church started to wane and they threatened to start thinking for themselves. The elite consequently hijacked this new science in order to switch the general belief from a judgmental God, which enabled control through fear etc., to a denial of the existence of God, and a belief that this life is all that there is, which enabled control through science and materialism. Darwin's theories on evolution was the first major coup on the mass mindset for the survival of the fittest, no God belief system which has been prevalent in the last century. This theory, which did not originate with Charles Darwin, was essentially the work of the Lunar Society, a revolutionary organization created to undermine God and overthrow monarchies, which Darwin's family was very involved in. By the end of his life Darwin himself did not believe the argument but the theories had taken hold and have since been taught as scientific fact. Once more our ideas about who and what we are have been programmed into us, beliefs which serve the elite and their goal of complete control. ideas which challenge the now orthodox belief in evolution or seek to publicize the eternal nature of the spirit are marginalized into groups which are subsequently labeled as cults. A word which is instinctively interpreted as a dangerous group of slightly insane people. The stigma has been deliberately attached to the word for this very reason by highly publicized cults and the behavior attributed to them. For example, the Jonestown Massacre in 1978, which research has shown was probably a CIA mind control experiment, and the Waco mass suicide by burning alive in 1993 when followers of David Koresh were attacked by the FBI and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco and Firearms, BAT, with tanks armed with flamethrowers. Coincidentally, the BAT had contacted a local hospital before the raid to inquire about the availability of beds in the burns unit. Cults which promote the world government and whose belief system incorporates the New World Order are supported by the elite, for example the Moonies, the Church of Scientology and certain strands of the New Age movement. The opposite side is also funded by the same people, the reactionary cult buster groups, like the Cult Awareness Network set up by Dr. West, a CIA asset which is heavily involved in Nazi-style mind control experiments. Education. Conventionally taught and accepted history and science have a fundamental influence on the way that we perceive the world. Therefore, the control of education and the way that these subjects are presented has been of paramount importance to the elite. This has been one of the main occupations of the Round Table. And in America the task was given to the Rockefeller Foundation by the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace to prevent American life from returning to its pre-World War I state. The lessons taught in the schools of today are those of confusion, there is no meaning, hierarchical position, envy those above, despise those below, dependency, success is measured by the opinion of others and only experts know the truth, obedience, do as others instruct in order to progress, and above all, conformity. A child is simply there to be filled with system-accepted facts, regimentally hurried from one lesson to the next to be bombarded with apparently unrelated information with any genuine enthusiasm or interest stifled in the boredom of classroom conformity. A child's intelligence is then measured by his or her meek receptivity to the systematic brainwashing and his or her ability to regurgitate these facts in examinations, whilst the teacher's performance is evaluated by the speed and completeness of the indoctrination. The curriculum is very carefully controlled with standardized textbooks which teachers, whatever their personal feelings on the subject, have to teach in order to retain their jobs. Real questions about the nature of life, the reasons behind the contradictions in accepted historical absurdities. The dreams of self-expression have no part in the straitjacket of system education. People are consumers and cogs in the corporate machine, and those who can accept this role are what the education process call successful. If conformity is the price of success, those who seek alternative views and reject the indoctrination are made to experience shame and a sense of failure. We are taught that the elite system of corporate-led consumerism has been freely created and that it provides the only answer for a meaningful, worthwhile life. Childhood happiness, enthusiasm and excitement for life are suffocated as we are taught to operate within a system which denies the very essences of humanity, love and the ability to question and search for the truth of our current existence. The media. Information about and interpretation of current affairs is gained exclusively through the media. Newspapers, TV and radio. Newspapers are presented as being independent or having a known political leaning, and TV is supposedly unbiased and independent. This is simply not the case. Information about events come from official sources who can present the view that the elite want the public to accept. Alternatively, news stories are derived from central news agencies, for example Reuters, who give everybody the same story. Newcomers to a media company are expected to toe the conventional line, or suddenly their prospects become bleak. Journalists who analyze and think independently are dangerous and are few and far between. This is not to suggest that every single journalist from the boardroom down to the hack is involved in some massive conspiracy and cover-up. Once the framework has been set up, which it deliberately has been over the last few centuries, the system is self-regulatory simply through market forces. Running a newspaper or television station is an expensive business which instantly limits those organizations which can operate one. Such businesses are obviously financially successful in the system, so have an interest in maintaining the status quo. Opinions and stories which challenge the establishment are therefore of no interest to these companies and are viewed as subversive. The media industry is also advertising-based, with prices of newspapers kept below the manufacturing costs by advertising income. Multinationals will not support those newspapers, magazines which are viewed as anti-business, so such publications are marginalized out of existence simply by market forces. Advertiser-friendly media companies keep their readership in a suitable buying frame of mind by not being controversial, not presenting difficult articles or programs. The threat of withdrawal of advertising is generally sufficient to ensure the media companies vigilantly filter the stories they present, but if one slips through, business organizations often combine forces to pressurize editors into reviewing their content. This is done through letters, lawsuits, and even parliamentary bills. An example of these so-called flak machines is Accuracy in Media, AIM, a collection of corporate giants, including 8 oil companies, whose function is to maintain a corporate-friendly media in the U.S. A look at the board members of media companies is revealing about their alleged independence. In America, a large number of the directors of NBC, CBS and ABC all have common involvement with Rothschild/Rockefeller/Morgan companies, as well as being members of the Council on Foreign Relations and Trilateral Commission. In Britain, the Daily Telegraph is owned by the Hollinger Group, who advisors, directors include Henry Kissinger, Lord Carrington, Brzezinski and Lord Rothschild. The current chairman of NM Rothschild, Evelyn de Rothschild, is on the board of the Daily Telegraph. A former board member, Andrew Knight, Bill, is now executive chairman of the rival News International, which runs the Times and the Sun, and which is funded by the Oppenheimers and the Rothschilds. Regulatory bodies such as the Press Complaints Commission also have links with the same people, for example the chairman, Lord Wackham, who is a director of NM Rothschild. Most people form their opinions on the basis of newspapers whose political stance mirrors their own. As all media organizations are owned by companies with the same interests and have their content dictated by the advertisers and obtain their stories from the same sources, all sides of public opinion are easily manipulated. This is used to divert attention away from the true agenda. Investigators getting near to the truth are branded as anti-Semitic, so attention is focused away from their information onto their apparent racism. Exposed books, such as Peter Wright's Spy Catcher, are publicly opposed by those in government to give credence to their revelations. Their exposure of what are generally innocent people are then believed more readily. Sensitive information is released when overshadowed by another news story. For example, identity cards were announced by Michael Howard on the day of the Loyalist ceasefire in Northern Ireland. Libya has been blamed for the Lockerbie bombing, among other things, to undermine Colonel Gaddafi, when all the evidence points to the CIA and other intelligence agencies. The Libyan leader is, in fact, one of the evil tyrants the media so love to create as a simplistic bad guy at which the public can direct their animosity. He is not exactly a saint, but, in the 1980s, Gaddafi was responsible for 14 deaths, mostly Libyans, as compared